Hi, and welcome to Stories of Climate Change Hope, the podcast that brings you a little bit of hope every other week. My name is Steffen Schwartmann, and today we'll listen to the climate story of Raul Kazan. Hi, Raul, how are you doing?
Hey man, I'm really good. You?
Yeah, I'm good too. So I'm calling from Bayreuth in Germany. Where are you at, Raul?
Right now I'm in Brussels. I live here for the next 2 to 3 years, but originally I'm from Siebenbürgen, from Transylvania, Romania.
Oh, wow. It's a long journey then.
hmm
Yeah, I mean, there's really a lot we could talk about because you founded your own organization. You have experience in working for the EU as an expert in the European Committee of the Regions, and you worked in outreach for an organization and as a legal consultant. So there's really a lot we could talk about. Maybe we can start with some basics.
No, let's start with the celebration if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, I'm up for a celebration.
I'm really happy with this podcast episode because basically right now, this week, I am marking 10 years of existence of 2 Celsius Network.
Oh, right, nice.
So basically, the first project that we ever started with 2 Celsius, which is an environmental organization that started in Transylvania exactly 10 years ago. So basically, yeah, we celebrate a decade. Now, 10 years ago, we started our first ever project. And if you're willing, I could tell you something about it. It's probably the most beautiful project I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's start with the celebration. 10 years of 2 Celsius. Go ahead. Yeah.
So here it is. It was like in the spring of 2010. I was still living in the United States at the time. I was working for the Earth Day Network, which is a big network and a big NGO in the US. It's not that popular in Europe, but in the US is of the sorts of Greenpeace or WWF. So I was working there, and I was planning my return to Europe, and I really wanted to start over my own business at that time. And what I was trying to do in those moments is I was very impressed with a book that I read, and that book was called The Green Color Economy. So it was about, it was written by Van Jones, first of all. He was the Green Jobs counselor of Barack Obama in his first term. And I really wanted to do something in this area, in some way to combine leftist thought with environmentalism in the context of climate change. So to promote green collar jobs, so to say. And as I got back home, I registered my company. I mean my NGO. Sorry, it's a nonprofit. Um, and all randomly I went to visit my mom. My mom at the time was a teacher in a school high in the mountains in the Carpathians, in a small town where I was born. And I was just checking out how things are for my mom at work, And as I got there, I witnessed something really shocking. I mean, mildly shocking, I would say. There were many kids that were coming from the villages in the mountains. There are villages scattered all over the area, high up in the mountains, that kind of depend on the village, on the town where I was born. The name of the town is Kujir. And all those kids, given the economic crisis, couldn't come to school anymore but by walking. And it's kind of crazy because some of them were supposed to walk even 15 kilometers on mountain roads to come to school. And I was like pretty much outraged. Like, how can you do this to these kids? You know, I mean, I mean, it impedes access on education. Let's be honest. And they used to have some sort of a school bus, uh, well, like a school car, you know, because it was like a 4x4 that was carrying them from home to school, and they didn't have money to pay, I guess, for gas and for a driver, and that was it. They were supposed to walk. So suddenly I had the revelation. I was like, all these kids deserve a mountain bike, you know. So there were like 30 kids, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do whatever I can to get each kid from the mountains a mountain bike to come in the valley to school, you know. And this is how the project started, you know. And I had a good friend in England, and we're like, okay, dude, let's just do something to get bicycles for these kids. And I was like, and at the same time, let's try to promote one way or another the green jobs thing, you know. And it was pretty interesting because then there was a bicycle factory still in Transylvania, you know, and I got in contact with them, and they hopped on the program, and they were willing to donate really good mountain bikes for these kids, you know. And kind of we needed some extra money, so in order to attract some extra money, we decided to cycle across Europe, from England, north of England, all the way to the Carpathians in Romania, you know. So basically we had to cross Europe to draw attention to this issue and to gather some money. And finally we got all the money we needed. We had a couple of nice sponsors, and we got the 30 bikes for those kids. And it was a kind of like a charity program, but at the same time, you know, I managed to, on a very small scale, naturally, um, to promote green jobs. And those green jobs were in the bicycle factory, which was basically at 60 kilometers away from the town that I was born. So it was like pretty local, you know.
So green jobs because the bicycles were manufactured more sustainably than other bicycles.
No, I call them green jobs for the no, for the mere reason that that they were assembled, designed and assembled there, you know.
Oh yeah, locally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And secondly, merely because they are bikes. And having a bike, it's obviously the cleanest means and most efficient means of transportation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I felt pretty green about the whole thing, you know. And I think it's so. This is how Two Celsius basically started. You know, I mean, that was my first project 10 years ago.
So in the beginning, your first motivation was to, yeah, give young children access to a school, and then it just happened. I mean, it was logically about the bicycles, and then it is already like something like a climate action initiative.
Yeah. Well, it was the spurt of the moment, I would say, because it came, I told you, randomly into my attention. You know. So, but what I wanted at the time to do with Two Celsius was a network of environmental journalists from all over Central and Eastern Europe. My idea was to gather them together, you know, and create content, because probably you don't know, but 10 years ago in those parts of Europe, reporting on climate was at best a joke, you know. So, I mean, it was a field completely ignored.
And why was that the case? I mean, it was probably because they were other issues at hand that were more important. I mean, when you have children who don't have access to school, I guess focusing on access to education is like a rudimentary basis that you need before you have like climate action. Would you agree? I mean, was there a reason why there was no focus on yeah, climate change issues?
I think that the reason is more profound than this. The We were in full blown times of Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, if you remember, which is the dumbest film,
The documentary, right?
yeah, which is the most horrible documentary ever made on this topic, if you ask me. It was it was that idea that everybody, every single person is individually responsible for the great climate crisis that is unfolding, you know. I find this outrageous, you know, just to blame and to put the burden of responsibility on the shoulders of people, whether they're poor or not.
Yeah, usually, yeah. I guess that does not really motivate anyone to become more active. I
Mm,
mean, for
exactly.
me, it would just make me really anxious and desperate if I would just, yeah, just think like, okay, like I'm responsible and my whole life, I need to question my whole life and it's just everything is bad. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't motivate me at all.
Well, first of all, the threats, you know, weren't really palpable. I mean, they weren't immediate at the time. And it was pretty ridiculous to see the relations between the terrible floods, for example, that were going to come, and the fact that I have to, you know, turn off my computer and not leave it on standby, which was like so ridiculous, you know. And it was just this enormous emphasis on personal responsibility that really bothered me, and it that didn't bother only me. Obviously, it had a huge effect on countries in way of development, because you know, I mean, in Eastern European countries, so post-communist countries like, say, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Slovakia, whatever, you know, it's, I mean, you couldn't have had an environmental consciousness so easily, and all these people were struggling, you know, to have a better life after communism, you know. And they were just discovering that, you know, the savage capitalism that they're experiencing is not exactly heaven on earth. And that was basically the reason for which, you know, climate crisis was not really in the public agenda,
Mm,
because, you know, on the public sphere there were like completely different things, like pension reform. And given that it was 2009, 2010, it was already the great economic crisis, right? That
yeah,
started in 2008 in the United States, and it reverberated in the EU for like at least 2 more years. So I remember Romania was like deep in trouble in 2010. And you know, budgetary cuts and all the whole idea of austerity was just so dumb and so disgusting. And suddenly, hey, on top of that, by the way, you should turn off your standby light at the computer and take shorter showers because, you know, the planet. Like, come on, give me a break.
yeah.
I, I just got my salary cut by 40%, and you're giving me this.
I actually never thought about that political dimension. Yeah, for post-Soviet countries.
Yeah, it's half of the
Yeah.
EU. I mean,
So, yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course. No, no, no. Yeah. So how did you continue then with your NGO to Celsius? What was your next project?
well, obviously, we had a couple of funds at the time, and we started to produce some content. But the idea of having a media production entity, it didn't really uh, sound well in terms of sustainability of the business, and we had to kind of give it up, and we switched to advocacy and research. So starting 2013 ish, we started to work on a lot of advocacy and research, and we were very much focused on transport. And because we immediately became members of Transport and Environment Network in Brussels, and then membership in Climate Action Network came up, and then in the European Environmental Bureau. And this is how we kind of connected to the, say, Brussels based, kind of European networked, say, environmental civil society. So we basically started to work with either small European funds or ECF, which is like Environmental Climate Foundation funds, on different issues related initially to transport, but then we expanded to bioenergy and other stuff, especially, for example, mountain climate change in the mountains and mountain communities. So we started to deal with this kind of stuff. But probably the most important things that we started over, it was like, well, it started like 3 years ago. It was what we call strategic litigation. And of course, right now you see it all over the place. Like all these climate trials that take place in different European states, such as Urgenda in the Netherlands, or the case in Ireland, and there's one in Germany that wasn't really successful, but it keeps going on.
Hmm. Maybe we can skip ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I remember, yeah, like we met in Brussels actually, the two of us
Mhm.
at the University Saint Louis, Brussels, and we were part of a course on EU environmental policy and law there. And I remember on the first day when I met you, you mentioned that you have your own NGO, you have 2 Celsius, and you actually had a new client, I think, a shepherd that you brought into the People's Climate Case. I guess that's all like we were before in 2013. Now we are 2019, 2020. So what was that about? What's the People's Climate Case? I guess it's one of the major cases.
Well, absolutely. Well, I have to correct you a little here. It's not that Shepherd is not my or our client.
Okay, yeah.
We are an NGO and a nonprofit, so we represent him together with Climate Action Network and a lawyer's firm from Hamburg in the People's Climate Case. But People's Climate Case basically means that a bunch of people from Europe, from different European member states, obviously, brought the European institutions to court at the European Court of Justice, the General Court in Luxembourg, for failing to have higher ambition on climate. So basically, what these people are attacking are the three important European pieces of legislation, which are first the LULUCF legislation. It's really important for us because it deals with land use change, and forestry. The other one was the effort sharing regulation, the current climate action regulation, and that's extremely important, especially for the fact that it kind of gives the right to pollute a little more in order to catch up with the industrial development to Eastern European member states, and the ETS, of course. So yeah, we got these plaintiffs, and it will be interesting to tell you who the initial plaintiffs were. But I mean, all the plaintiffs are initial. So I'll start with the one that kind of we represent, the one that you called our client. His name is Petru Vlad, and he's a shepherd in the Transylvanian Alps, basically. What he realized in time was the fact that basically at the altitude where he's living and he herds his cattle and sheep, doesn't have water anymore, and he got concerned, and suddenly he realized that he's losing a lot of money because all his animals have to go further and further up in order to have good grass to graze and water, access to water, literally, because at 700 meters altitude where he lives, it's pretty much drying out, so he has to go to altitudes like 1400 to 1500 meters altitude, so it was really interesting because we were documenting this kind of stuff from before, because I was very very interested in the way that climate change is hitting mountain areas, and in truth the mountain areas are the first to be hit in the climate crisis. And we realized I noticed this important phenomenon of the upward shift of vegetation, meaning that vegetation is actually going further and further up on altitude. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, how did you notice that? Did it get your attention? I mean,
I got on that by studying it and you know having a lot of research on it, having access to this sort of research. But the I think I own this revelation literally to the Alpine Convention. Because with the General Secretariat of the Alpine Convention, I had the opportunity to visit many places in the Alps along many years, for like almost 10 years. So it was almost like in every year I was going in the Alps to visit different regions and check out what's happening here and there, And I had the opportunity to meet with scientists that live in actually that work in alpine research facilities, such as the research facility in on Jungfraujoch
oh, all right.
in Switzerland, and there is the Schneeferner House in Garmisch-Partenkirchen in Germany. Well, on the Zugspitze, literally,
Yeah.
and many others, especially very good French researchers on phenology and a lot of interesting stuff, I must say, and it sprung out that, like, oh my God, this is like happening big time. And then I even wrote a piece on that, and I included the Rocky Mountains in the United States because I had some contacts at the Mountain Research Institute in Boulder, Colorado. And then,
What does it mean? You wrote a piece. What was it? An article,
yeah, yeah.
like a journalist article, or research paper, or policy paper?
It's actually an article because but it's not a very journalistic article. It was like a well thought and well researched. I brag now, but it's not a pleasant reading. It's just
Very detailed and scientific. Then.
it's not very detailed, but it's a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
data.
Yeah.
It's not a fun. You can find it on 2 Celsius. Yeah, so that was the reason that we went in the mountains pretty much at home in Transylvania, right? In 2015, and actually at the time we were trying to prepare a short film for Arte with a French producer, and we found that guy that was going to be the plaintiff in the People's Climate case, and he was complaining about this thing. It was important to hear a shepherd complaining about this stuff for the mere reason that there's not much research taking place in the
Mm.
Carpathians.
Was
You know,
the yeah one question? Was the shepherd actually? I mean, he noticed that he has to go upper with his herd for the grazing, but did he actually already think about climate change, or was that something that you brought into the discussion or into the conversation with him?
yeah, yeah. He was
Okay, yeah,
he was pretty conscious. I mean, yeah, it was like, I mean, he's a peasant. It's like I would call him like a not highly educated person, but I mean, extremely smart and observant and
yeah.
aware of what's happening around.
Okay,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and obviously it's the mere fact that his business is basically affected directly that led us to see, notice, and then further observe that climate change is hitting us at this very second. In every minute of our mere existence, we are already encountering effects of climate change. And this guy became part of the bunch that was going to sue the European institution and start over the People's Climate case. But he was already, because it was 2015. I mean, we filmed him, and he had well, it was interesting. At the time, it was we filmed him because we were working for a film, some sort of a collage with climate change happening in many places in Europe. That was produced by a French company, Elephant Doc. That's the name of it, and we were very excited because the premiere took place at the COP 21 in Paris that year. So it was really cool going to COP 21 in Paris and seeing the this guy and the stuff that you filmed there. It was really empowering, especially for 2 Celsius. Like, look, we have our contribution at COP 21. Yeah, we're making history ourselves.
What was the reaction when you were on COP and showing this film? What did people say? Did it have a huge impact?
I mean, don't imagine it was a huge amphitheater and many people were watching it. It was like a small hall where
Mm.
few people were watching the premiere, because there were so many events all over the place. But yeah, it happened there, so it was a significant event.
No, I just thought that maybe you had like a really good conversation with some of the audience. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a huge event.
It's a really good question, but there were no questions, no answers whatsoever. There was no Q. Just
Oh yeah.
the film there, and that was it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But getting back to our issue now, it was just that that guy actually. For the People's Climate case, it wasn't me to choose this person. Of course, it's the best choice, but it was suggested from me from somebody from the European Commission.
hmm Yeah, and then your organization reached out to the shepherd.
Yeah, and we came
Yeah.
back to him. I was like, "Listen, this is what's going to happen. You're not going to make any money. You're not involved in it personally, so to say. It's just that let's try to make a bit of justice in this whole matter. You know."
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
And the guy was like, "Yeah, damn right, let's do it." And
Awesome.
it's it sounds easy, but there were many plaintiffs that actually, not in Romania, but in other countries, that were very reluctant, and eventually they bailed. But eventually, we had this guy in Romania. We have a German plaintiff, right? Probably from the north of Bremerhaven, in the islands in the Northern Sea, right? North Sea.
Mm.
And then there is a lavender producer, agriculture from France. There are three Portuguese guys that deal with beekeeping and with forests. And then, there is an Italian guy from Aosta, living in Gran Paradiso, in a beautiful area. He's affected, again, a guy in the mountains, and his production is being affected by climate change.
So your organization is representing these plaintiffs, right?
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
you are like the connection from their
Yeah.
hometown to Brussels or
Exactly.
to the EU. Yeah.
Basically represent the Romanian plaintiff, because it's our guy.
Oh
But
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
there are some organizations involved. Basically, it's on under the tutelage of Climate Action Network Europe. So we're members of it, so we're basically part of it as well.
Mm.
Not by default; it's just we're working on it full time. And
Yeah.
now, but probably I should tell you that the case was dismissed in
Mm-hmm.
first instance at the European Court of Justice, and right now we're waiting for the result of the appeal. So basically, we're pretty much on standby right now.
Okay.
It's a really crazy thing because I mean, it's happening very often and pretty much all the time, if you ask me, that in situations or cases like that, the standing of the plaintiffs is being denied,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it's extremely difficult to make the connection between the very issue of the Romanian shepherd in the Transylvanian Alps and the European legislation on climate change.
Mm.
It's just like,
Yeah.
it's not that such a strong direct link between them.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, it's a global issue, right?
I find it. I see it. You see it as well. But well, anyway, and it's a terrible fact that the European Council and the European Parliament, I mean, the lawyers representing these institutions, were immediate in denying the standing of these guys.
Mm.
And this is also a little mind-boggling, a little paradoxical, if not schizophrenic. The fact that we went to the European Parliament with the plaintiffs, we had some events, we met MEPs, and there were MEPs from literally all the political groups of the European Parliament, that said, "Oh, we're supporting you. That's insane. That's absolutely great what you're doing. So keep it up and all that." So these were the MEPs. Whereas at the same time, the European Parliament is like, okay, we're denying you standing. It's like, what? But this is the European Parliament as an institution, and these are the European parliamentarians, which
Hmm.
have a completely different approach. And I find this situation a little schizoid, if you ask me. But anyway, okay, we'll see in court. We'll see what's happening.
Okay, so right now you're on standby. You need a lot of endurance, and hopefully, yeah, the case will be back then
Yeah,
with good luck.
yeah. Thank you, thank you. I really don't know what's gonna happen. The chances are pretty slim, I must admit. But let's hope, hope is there, right?
Yeah, maybe let's get back a little bit in time. We were in, well, 2010. You founded the organization. Then we were 2013, 2015, and now we are, yeah, in standby. But before 2010, before your first job, um, yeah, actually, when was the time when you decided, okay, you wanted to support climate change mitigation or adaptation, or yeah, basically become more active?
So you mean me personally?
Yeah, 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 exactly. You personally.
Okay. Well, man, I don't know. It's like when I studied for my masters at the Central European University. I was very much into environmental policies and politics.
You studied political science there, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of had my major in it, if I can say so.
Hmm.
So I would say 2001, 2002, I started to dig into environmental policies. With climate change, actually strictly related to climate change, I started to work a little later. I was interested when I studied in Italy in the coming years. So it's like in 2002, 2004. I studied in Italy. That was local development, and there was a slight facet of sustainable development and climate change that at the time was, oh my God, so so thin. But well, I encountered it in terms of policies, but mostly in the academia. So after I graduated in Italy, I've done journalism in 2005 all the way to 2007. I got back to working in Bucharest. And in 2007, I had the opportunity to work on the first Romanian environmental magazine. It is called still Green Report, and I was the editor in chief of it, and I really
Nice.
loved it, at the time.
Yeah.
So because I was able to report only on this stuff, just environmental stuff in general, but climate change was at the core of it. But already 2007, imagine this was the Bali roadmap already, so it was in terms of climate change, the stuff was evolving, and it was, I mean, Al Gore's film was out already. The guy got the Nobel Peace Prize and the Oscar for his not so brilliant work, but well, yeah. I would say that on climate change, I started to work in 2007, strictly on climate change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. But like, how did you decide? I mean, was it just that you saw a job offer or someone approached you and it was like, okay, I will work on climate change, or was it like you were looking for a job in that field, climate change journalism?
Yes, somebody approached me. Well, okay, let me tell you, I never had one job. All my life, I had like two or three jobs at the same time.
Okay.
And at that time, I remember starting 2006 or 2005. I started to work for a consultancy in Belgium. It was long distance working, so I was like a consultant. I could have been whatever I wanted. So I was consulting them because they wanted to know a lot more about the Eastern European member states, which joined the EU or were going to join the EU. And I remember there were massive discussions about allocations and the European trading scheme in those years. Like big talk talks about money and carbon credits and so on and so forth. And I delved into it very much, even though at the same time I was working as a journalist and I was covering environmental issues. But I was in Romania, and I thought giving it this business twist, they're gonna pay more attention to it, and of course they did, especially in business journalism. When you come to this twist to it, it was like, oops, oh my god, there are brand new markets, and it's like actual virtual money. I mean, the stuff that they like big time, carbon credits, that's money, man. So this is how I started to actually work and have make a living out of it, really. So 2005, 2006, and then in 2007 I got offered this job for the mere reason that the person that offered me the job knew about my activity as a consultant and other environmental activities. Well, that became pretty noteworthy in Romania because, for example, I started the first slow foods convivium there. So slow food at the time was pretty high up globally and in Europe, of course. And everybody's concerned about what they put in their mouths eventually. And if you give it this local environmental and gastronomic twist, it's just like, oh my god, they can talk about it big time. And then it's health as well implied. So yeah, I got this job offered and I took it. So I basically, from that point on, I started to work on climate change.
Yeah, that's great. I mean,
Hmm.
it's an inspiration. I mean, I'm still a student. I'm still studying, but I can totally relate because I have many different interests, and I can imagine
Mhm.
working a couple of different
But you're a
jobs.
student? How old are
I'm 27 now. What?
you? Oh, man, you're indecently young.
Yeah, well, still a lot to do then. Yeah.
No, the funny thing is, like, you're 27, that means you're born in 1993, 92, kind of.
Yeah, 92.
I just cannot cope with it. It's just like, because I remember so well 1989, I mean, I lived the revolutions in the East, the fall of communism, and I cannot cope with the idea that somebody is born after that. I mean, if you're born after that, you should be like,
And haven't lived through it.
yeah, I mean, how you should be like 7 years old or something. It couldn't be more than that. But 7 years old is my son, Jesus.
Yeah. So I tell you what, let's put it down here. I think there's a lot we could talk about. I could definitely invite you again. I mean, you have a lot of experience and very diverse experience. Maybe a couple of more questions,
Sure,
but
sure.
more really short ones. Please, maybe you can answer shortly. Like, okay, like, what would you like to tell the listener, like, from your experience, was what is important, or what should they take from what you said today?
Oh, take this. Climate change is happening. It is happening now, and it's happening to your neighbor.
All right, good statement.
Hmm.
What are you looking forward to doing in the next week?
In the next week.
Yeah.
Oh,
It doesn't
well,
have to be related to climate change. It can
no,
be.
no, no. I'll answer to you very, very thoroughly because I got it mapped out pretty well. First of all, I'm healing my ankle because I twisted my ankle really badly running here in the forest around in Oudergem around Brussels.
Mhm.
So next week I'm gonna start running again. So it's gonna be easy peasy running. This is what I'm gonna be focused on. This is the most important thing. Second most important thing, I'm gonna play with my son a lot because he got himself a brand new bike, and it's kind of difficult for him.
Cool.
It's gonna be fun. Third, I'm gonna cycle myself a lot. Fourth, I'm working next week. I'll be working on an amazing project, probably I think a groundbreaking project at European level. There's a project that was started by a foundation. It's called Foundation Conservation Carpathia. And the idea is to make out of the whole Carpathian mountain range the green lung of Europe. So something like the Amazonia of Europe. Basically, they want to have a massive carbon sink for the whole European Union, and that would be the whole Carpathian mountain range, with a lot of primary and secondary forests that are going to be the main providers of negative emissions in the EU. Hmm? How's that for the next week?
Yeah, that that is a great plan. I see you are not running out of ideas. Last question. What motivates you? What keeps you going?
My son.
Awesome. We end this episode by saying that we want to commit ourselves to the healing of our world and our society. We want to bridge gaps and decrease the separation inside society and between us and our environment. We can do one part by leading conversations about climate change and talk about our personal story. And we want to do so by acting responsibly and respectfully, even when it is challenging. We will support others in their part and ask for help when we need it. And we will spread a little bit of hope every other day. So, Raul, thanks a lot for joining me here today.
Thank you, Stefan. I hope I'll see you around, man.
Thanks goes to Coco for the creative support and the logo design. And also thanks to Vulcan Recorder for the music contribution. You can listen to the podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and all other podcast distribution apps on your phone. The next episode will be released in 1 week or 2 weeks on a Sunday evening. Thank you for listening and make sure to tune in next time. Bye bye.